Speaking at the Nuclear Security Summit in Washington, the US President said, quote, "There's still a great deal of nuclear and radioactive material around the world that needs to be secured. Global stocks of plutonium are growing, nuclear arsenals are expanding in some countries, with more small tactical nuclear weapons, which could be at greater risk of theft. And as a consequence, one of the central goals of this summit was, how do we build on the work that has been done so that we have an international architecture which can continue the efforts, even though this is the last formal leaders' summit," end quote. And he went on about cooperation with European countries, and he invited the more than 50 nations in attendance at this summit to join a broader discussion among intelligence and security services about greater intelligence sharing. Obama was playing on the fear of ISIS and the prospect of them acquiring WMDs, which is not out of the question, of course. Sure, jihadis of the so-called Islamic State could get hold of the materials needed to make a nuclear weapon of some description. But it's not just this group which poses a threat. Many non-state actors could become players in the deadly nuclear weapons game. It's not a remote concern that we can simply dismiss as highly unlikely. Obama spoke a bit about the Iran nuclear deal as well. Notable by its absence at this summit was Russia. Putin refused to attend. Russia has been building up its military capabilities in recent years. Yeah. Nuclear terrorism. Obama said, "The single most effective defense against nuclear terrorism is fully securing this material so it doesn't fall into the wrong hands in the first place," end quote. But here's the thing, Mr. President. Nuclear terrorism isn't a new phenomenon. It didn't just pop up post-Cold War, or even post-9/11. The age of nuclear terrorism began in 1945, at the conclusion of the Second World War. The insanity of the Cold War arms race. People all over the planet became hostages, and despite the fact that the Cold War ended over, what now, quarter of a century ago, nuclear hostages we remain. The United States and Russia are clearly the main players in this game. The clear and real threat of nuclear annihilation, the strident, sometimes belligerent rhetoric of political figures in the West and in the East, and the very existence of nuclear weapons sold falsely as a deterrent and a necessary tool of national security. This is nuclear terrorism. What if this horrific scenario played out? The North Korean regime attacks the South, destroys Seoul with a nuclear weapon. The Americans react and destroy Pyongyang. The first attack is a terrorist act. The second is also a terrorist act, surely. What then? Maybe another strike by North Korea at Japan, if it's able. And the US reacts by completely annihilating North Korea. Maybe China then gets involved, maybe Russia, maybe the UK, maybe the French, maybe the Indians, maybe the Pakistanis, the Israelis. The world would not stand idly by. A very short, utterly devastating Third World War might play out, possibly ending in the demise of the species, as well as most life on Earth. The best policy, Mr. Obama, the best future defense against nuclear terrorism, I would say, would be to outlaw nuclear weapons and drastically improve global security through a united effort, which would require an international order which doesn't exist yet. Countries and leaders have to change their ways of thinking and interacting. But this won't happen until the peoples of the world rise in their opposition to the current war system.